Hello, and welcome to another edition of Capital Area Chats. I'm your host, Paul Brogan, and we're about all things in the greater Concord area. The people, the places, and the things that make this an extraordinary place to live, to work, and to play. Today's show is very, very special because our guest is very, very special. She's a name that really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway because she's a legend, not only in the Concord area, but in New Hampshire and even beyond. And it's Laura Knoy. And I want to welcome you to Capital Area Chats.
I am so thrilled to be here, Paul. Thank you for asking me.
Well, thank you for making yourself available because you have as busy a schedule now, really, as you did during the almost 26 years in which you were the host of The Exchange. And may I say early on, The Exchange was a show that was part of my daily routine. I made myself available for that hour because I wanted to listen and everything else. But the program was never routine. And that's a credit to you, and that's a credit to the energy you brought to it, which on radio, you made your listeners feel as though we were sitting down with you and your guests, just engaging in a wonderful conversation because it was a remarkable run, and it probably is the best loved radio program that, certainly in my lifetime, which is a few years. But I still, run into people all the time, and they say, I so miss The Exchange. It was one of those programs that helped start conversations at the office. People would say, did you hear so-and-so on The Exchange this morning? And you probably did, several thousand shows during the course of 25
I should have done the math before I came, but you figure 5 days a week.
Yes.
25 and a half years.
Yes.
I did take 2 sizable maternity leaves.
Yes,
I have 2 sons, but yeah, do the math. It's thousands of people.
Way
and it got to the point, Paul, where about 10 years in, when people would come into the studio and they would, I would introduce myself and they would introduce themselves. And instead of saying, it's nice to meet you, I would say, it's nice to see you, because I wasn't sure, maybe I'd met them before.
Yes, exactly.
But I'd met so many people over the years that I couldn't remember everybody who I met. So.
Well, it was a remarkable, truly.
You.
And I must also say, when you sat in for Diane Rehm a few times.
Right, several times over the summer.
It was wonderful.
It was fun.
You never confined your topics and subjects to strictly New Hampshire. You had presidential candidates during the primary season.
Right.
You had authors, you had writers, you had philanthropists, you had people who were passionate about particular causes. And it ran the gamut to virtually I had certain favorites. I loved when you had Amy Diaz on and Barry Steelman and talked movies and the Oscars. And of course, when you had Michael Herman and other people from the various New Hampshire bookstores on to talk about titles and things like that. It made for fascinating, because I'm sitting down writing down the titles they're talking about, never remembering that at the end you always say it's on the website, the titles. But it was just, you brought out in people we thought we knew all kinds of different facets and aspects to their character. And that is a remarkable thing to be able to achieve. And that was, you certainly, for anybody, were a role model as to what a model interviewer should be.
Oh, well, thank you, Paul. It's really kind. You do a very nice job yourself. I've watched a couple of
you.
your shows.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But it's really a thrill to have you here and to ask you, so what is life like for you now that you are not on the typical, because no doubt that involved getting up very early in the morning and being very prepared to go on the air and make it seem so effortless. But now that you're not doing that after nearly 26 years, what is life like for you?
Wow. Well, I took most of the summer off. In June, I left in the mid-June of 2021. I took most of the summer off just to decompress and read and relax. And if it was a nice day, I went to a lake, or I went up to the White Mountains, or I'd ride my bike around Concord and have a picnic at the Merrimack River. And, I've worked since I was 14 or 15 years old. You always have a summer job.
Yes.
So for the first time in many, many years, I just took the summer off to enjoy New Hampshire and family, and which ended up being a good thing. I spent a lot of time in Keene, where I'm from.
Yes, exactly.
Go Blackbirds. And my mother was ailing, so I spent, a nice amount of time with her. I took her on some picnics, and sadly she died this fall. So
sorry.
what a gift to have that summer where I was able to say, yeah, I think I'll go see Mom today. I couldn't have done that when I was working.
No.
Once the fall came, a lot of people asked me to do what I always did, which is, we're having a panel discussion for our organization. Can you moderate the panel? Sure, I've done that about 1,000 million times.
Yes.
Sure, so that's been fun. We need a keynote speaker for our event, so I've done that a number of times. People need maybe a special interview for a special project, so I've done some special interviews. So I spent the fall kind of working on that, and I guess I have my own little consulting business now, just doing projects for people around moderating panels, giving speeches, doing special interviews. Also in the fall, late fall, I did something kind of crazy for a woman in her 50s. I became a lifeguard.
Wow.
Yeah, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I've always been a swimmer. So, but I thought, I always kind of wanted to be a lifeguard, but who has time? I was raising 2 children. I was hosting a very demanding, radio show. So in addition to my consulting freelance work, I took the lifeguard training course right here at the Concord YMCA. It's a 5-minute walk from my house. And it was really hard, Paul. Like just something totally different. I've never anything like that. Plus I'm left-handed, so some of the explanations of how to jump in and rescue people, like I had to sort of compute it being left-handed, and dragging people up from the bottom of the pool. And I'm strong, but oh my gosh. I thought, in the middle of the training, I thought, I can't do this. But I did it. So now I'm a lifeguard. I have a little part-time job at the YMCA.
So you totally got out of your comfort zone and
did.
tackled something
I did,
new.
Completely.
But
something
how satisfying.
Physical. Yeah, something physical. It's not, I'm using my brain, obviously. I'm watching people in the pool, and I don't want them to drown. But it's more physical, in the physical realm. It's not in the sort of on the computer, digital realm. So I love that.
How great.
Yeah,
it's
fun.
I love stories when somebody, you're used to doing certain things, but suddenly at a middle age or something, you decide, I want to try something completely different instead of just taking the safe route and all of that. And just, wow, that's wonderful.
Well, I had told my husband when I decided to leave that I thought the freelance work would come in, but just in case, I'm going to get a part-time job just to make sure that there's some money coming in. A lot of people have said, how's retirement? And I always say, I'm not retired.
No.
I'm not old enough and I'm not rich enough. So this part-time job came up, and most of my colleagues are half my age. And that's okay. It's a lot of fun.
It is.
It's a lot of fun.
And do you miss the exchange at all?
No, I don't. And that's not personal.
No.
I loved my boss, Michael. I loved my team, a wonderful team of women who backed me up every second of the day. But it was mentally and emotionally exhausting the last couple years with all the political divisiveness in our country, the nastiness, people making up, people not caring about the facts. And then COVID. On top of that, COVID. So you just felt like, Paul, to be honest, you were taking a bath in a toxic tub every single day. And that is not a knock at anybody at NHPR. I'm still working with NHPR. I still have some special projects with them and a bunch of other clients. But just being in the news business was just became such a negative space. And I thought, I want to see what else I can do. 25 years, too, is long enough to do anything.
Extraordinary, yes. So it's good when you know the time is right. There's nothing worse than staying when your heart and soul are no longer in it, and you're just sort of slogging through each thing, because your listeners would have picked up on that. and it wouldn't have the same vitality.
Right.
So
Right.
that's
So,
wonderful.
yeah.
Though. That's so.
Yeah.
A lifeguard. I think that's exciting.
Most of the rest of my time is, though, doing these,
Yes, exactly.
consulting gigs, narrating, speaking,
Yes,
moderating,
you do at
and
Christmas
so forth.
time at the Capitol Center.
That's right.
Correct.
Yep. I just emailed Skip Poole, the
Mm-hmm.
director of that, today, and saying, "What's our date again for December?" So yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Well, you have such an exquisitely comforting, warm, and welcoming speaking voice.
Thank you.
That conveys so much emotion and has just it's very nice to listen to. And that, I think, was one of the reasons for the exchange being, because you never became hysterical on the air.
No, of course not. Oh, my goodness.
If someone threw you a curveball, one would never know it because you managed to maintain control over the entire show in such a good way. And I think, again, for listeners, that made it very appealing because there was never a case of, oh, what's going to happen today, or what kind of a mood is she going to be in, because everyone was treated with such respect. And even if someone was spouting something that the listener knew was nonsense, you managed to bring it back to a certain point and a sense of reality, which was wonderful.
Or the listeners would call in and say, "That's nonsense."
Exactly,
So
absolutely.
that I didn't have to say it.
Exactly. And speaking of other projects, you have one coming up on Wednesday, April the 6th.
Yes, let's talk about that.
Yes, you are going to be talking with 4 Concord area authors at the Bank of New Hampshire stage. And you're going to be talking with them about why they write and what motivates them and what in the area, perhaps in the Concord area, generates a certain writer's drive and passion, among other things. And thanks to Margaret Porter, one of the writers, we are fortunate to have you as our host and our person who will be, generating the conversation both on the stage and hopefully from the audience members too.
Right. April 6th
Yes,
at
Wednesday
the Bank of New
evening.
Hampshire stage. Don't be modest, Paul. You're one of the authors
Okay.
featured.
And Virginia McCrager and Mark Okrant,
Right.
along with Margaret Porter.
Right. I was so excited when Margaret called me and asked me to moderate because I love, love, love books. I mean, really. One of my absolute favorite things to do, besides being outside in New Hampshire, hiking and biking, is just sitting down with a great book, no one bother me, and just read. So I love books. And I think, Paul, we've been New Hampshire's been in a phase for the past 10, 15 years where people really want to support local.
Yes.
Big eat local movement, that's great. A big shop local movement, that's great. We see more and more of that every year. So I say it's time to read local.
Read local.
And I do feel like, Concord is such a great community. And we think, oh, there's Don Bruggerman. He runs the local bagel place where I
Yes.
get my bagels. And there's Franz where I get
Yes.
my nice bread.
Bread
And
and
there's,
chocolate.
Michael
Yes.
Herman where I buy my
Yes.
books locally. And, there are all these, there's Gondwana where I buy clothes from these wonderful local proprietors.
Yes.
But local authors also add something to our community. These are the people who create culture in Concord, who entertain us, who enrich us, who make us a little bit smarter, whether their books are about Concord, like
Yes,
yours is,
right.
or about New Hampshire, like Mark's, or who go further afield, like Margaret's and Virginia's.
Yes.
You add culture and maybe a little class and a little gravitas to our fair little city. So I think it's time to read local. So I'm really excited.
Well, as an author, we're so fortunate to have Gibson's because Gibson's will do events for us that are as good as if you were a New York Times #1 best-selling author. They just launch your book with such a passion and such a sense of gratitude to the community that it's impossible not to be stirred to want to sit
Right.
down and write again or to interact, because I've had both Margaret and Virginia on the show, and Margaret and I have become very friendly through the last few years. And there is a joy in writing and being in this community and having it appreciated and recognized by a growing number of people who no longer walk by the shelf in Gibson's that says local authors,
Right.
but actually stop and pick the books up, look inside to see what they're about. And it's a wonderful, another sense of a city of 43,000 people, and we have the Capitol Center, we have Bank of New Hampshire Stage, we have the Music School, the Audie, Hatbox, Gibson's, so many, Red River Theater.
Right, Red River.
That provide a plethora of things for every taste, really.
And you guys, the local authors, I really think you're part of that cultural capital of the capital city. And it's a virtuous cycle, and when I was host of the Exchange, as you mentioned, we did the book show every June and every December. And people always called and said, what should I read by local authors this year? So I love that cultural vibe
it's really
in Concord and around New Hampshire, really.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So the event is on Wednesday, the 6th of April. Tickets are free, but you do need to go online to ccanh.com to get a ticket for it. And Laura will be there talking with audience members and talking with the authors, and books will be available for sale if somebody wants them afterwards, and everyone will be mingling if people have questions. But it's a great chance to find out what makes authors tick and why we, living in the Concord area, feel a passion about sitting down and just telling a story.
Right, and the cool thing is that the event is at the Bank of New Hampshire Stage,
Yes.
which used to be
The
Concord Theater, which that's the title of your book because you
Yes.
worked there for what?
27 years.
27 years.
From the time I was
Wow.
14 till it closed.
Wow.
So I would probably still be there if it hadn't closed. But it was another situation where you met everyone in Concord, because at one time or another, everyone came to the movies.
Right.
And it was a wonderful sense of what our community is. And books are a perfect segue to another project that you are working on or have completed your first book, and Hide and Go Seek. It is historical fiction, is
Yes.
it? And had you had a desire before you sat down to write a book?
Yes, always. When I was a little girl, a lot of little girls have diaries, or at least
Yes.
they did in my era. And the cover of my diary said, "The Great American Novel." So, and that's going back to 7, 8 years old. So I've always loved writing. I've always loved stories. I gravitate towards fiction, partly because I just love great stories, partly because I worked in the news business my whole
Yes.
career. So
Right.
why would I read more nonfiction?
Exactly.
that's like
Yes.
work. So, but I love being transported by fantastic fiction. So I've off and on thought about writing a novel, and then depends on where you want to count it. About 30 years ago, a story landed in my lap. But I was young. Career building came first, then building a family came first. So I couldn't really take that germ of a story that was given to me more than 30 years ago, Paul, until I was, at a later age.
Yes.
The career was solidly built. The kids were in their teens, so they didn't need mom around. In fact, they didn't want mom around. So I finally was able to start working on it. So shall I tell you where the germ of the
Please.
story came from?
Please.
So I was an exchange student in Alsace, France. Alsace-Lorraine, you've probably heard of that in your history classes.
have.
The disputed area between France and Germany for
Right.
so many years. I was an exchange student in Alsace in the 80s, and I became friends with a woman who was my mother's age. And one day she offhandedly said to me, I was a hidden child during the war. Well, she was Jewish, so as you know, a lot of Jewish parents, when the Nazi occupation of France got very bad during World War II, a lot of Jewish parents hid their children
Yes.
with, sympathetic families,
Right.
with farmers, and a lot of them in convents and monasteries. So, and there's a whole stories, Protestant ministers hiding, hundreds of kids and so forth. So she was a hidden child at a convent, and I thought at the time, oh, that's interesting, wow. But I was in my 20s, I was
Yes.
busy, as I said, career building and then
Exactly.
family building. So, But I always thought I should write that story. And then my friend, Annette, died in 2015. She had cancer. She was in her early 80s. As I said, she was more my mother's age than my age. And I said to her daughter, who I'd become quite close to, her sons and her daughter, I said, gosh, I always wanted to write your mother's story, and now she's gone. And Brigitte said, well, there's my Uncle Jacques, and he remembers everything. So that was 2018. I started doing all this research. The family had some tapes. So it shows how far back it goes. Cassette tapes, you know what those are.
Yes, I remember them well.
Younger viewers, they're about this big, and they jammed a lot.
They do.
In 2005, the 3 children from this family got together and recorded their memories for their children and grandchildren. So the family shared those tapes with me. I listened to them, I don't know, 3 dozen times. And then in the fall of 2018, I flew over to France and interviewed Jacques, my friend Annette's older brother, and he told me his story, and then I started doing my own research. But memory is a funny thing, Paul. Like, people can't remember every single possible detail.
Right. Exactly.
And the story is largely told from the perspective of children, because they were children when this war happened. So there's a lot children don't understand. So it's historical fiction based heavily, heavily, heavily on this amazing story of my friend Annette's mother, how she shepherded the family through World War II. She had these unbelievable skills. She always knew, she had these predictive skills. Her kids thought she was supernatural.
Yes.
Because she always knew it was going to happen, and she'd kind of make a plan before the worst would happen. At a time when everybody else was saying, oh, it'll be fine. Oh, France will never go to war. Oh, if France goes to war, they'll win. You know, and she was thinking, no. She was uneducated. She really didn't speak French very well. She mostly spoke Yiddish. She didn't learn how to drive until she was probably 50 or 60. But she had this unbelievable power to just look ahead, see what was happening, and make a plan. That's why it's called hide and go seek, because the family is just constantly, if you look at a map of France, it's just you know, they're always on the run. On the run. So, thank you for asking. I love talking about the book.
And
so it's coming.
Yes. Okay.
It's coming. This is how I like to say it, Paul.
Okay.
I have an agent and a publisher.
Yes.
I just haven't met them yet.
Okay. All right.
So the manuscript is done. I sent it out to a group of early readers, because that's what you're supposed to do. You know, send it out to a group of trusted colleagues.
Who will be frank with you.
Who will be frank, not family and friends.
No. No.
My sister-in-law offered to look at it. I said, no. So I'm waiting to hear back from them.
Okay.
Once I incorporate their comments, which some of them have come in, and they're already just, oh, what a good idea.
Spot on.
Oh, I can't believe I didn't include that. You know, then once I sort of gather all their wisdom and incorporate it, I'll start sending it out to agents and publishers again and say, hey, you need to publish this. This is an amazing story.
So perhaps in the next 2 years or so.
Oh, maybe. I'm hoping sooner.
Sooner.
I'm hoping sooner.
Okay, all right.
It's so hard to wait. You know,
I know.
It's hard because as a journalist, I was on deadline every single day. I did a thing every single day.
Yes.
I produced a product every single day. So it's hard to wait, you know?
Yes.
It's hard to wait. But I know I need to do the early readers. I know I need to incorporate their
Well, you want
wisdom.
it to be the best it possibly
That's
can
right.
be as
That's
a
right.
tribute to them.
Yes.
And so that you have no regrets after it's
That's
out.
right.
Say, why didn't I do that?
That's
or why
right.
didn't I?
Right.
And
Right.
that's so important.
Right.
Because
and,
it's like a child. It really
Right.
is your child.
Right.
And so, well, I will be in the first of the line at Gibson's when it comes out and have you back on to talk about
awesome.
it more, because it sounds tremendously moving and just, and it is a story, I think, that definitely needs to be told and should be told.
Well, and the thing that's different, if I could say, about this book, and one of my sons, because your kids always, you know,
Yes,
Mom,
of
what are
course.
you doing? Right?
Yes.
They're your worst critics.
Yes.
One of my sons said, Mom, another World War II novel. Who needs that? But mine is different because it takes place largely in Alsace, which is right on the German border, was annexed by the Germans. Not occupied, annexed.
Yes.
Welcome back to the Reich. You are now German citizens again. and that's a whole different ballgame. So,
Will you write again someday if this turns out to be a completely satisfying experience for you?
oh yes, I mean, once this book is published, I have 4 more in a series.
Wow.
Yeah, because people don't know about Alsace.
No.
How it was occupied by the Germans, and then the French, and then the Germans, and then the French. And so I'd like to start from this point, World War II, and work backwards. Because before World War I, Alsace was occupied by the Germans for 50 years. And then in 1870, there was the Franco-Prussian War. And so this region, imagine Concord changes nationality 5 times in 70 years.
Wow.
5 times in 70 years. So if you were born in 1869, you were born French, then you were German, then you were French, then you were German, then you were French. So there's a lot of stories in this part of France that frankly, I don't see other American novelists telling.
No, not at all. So, wow. That's
yeah.
exciting.
Yeah.
It really is. It sounds gripping. It really.
So 3 of those books will be adult novels.
Yes.
And then I have an idea for a graphic novel for teenagers, and then an idea for a kid's book about a cat in Strasbourg.
How great.
The cat at the cathedral.
So your creativity is far from being used up or anything like that.
Really
you have
excited.
wonderful things.
I'm really excited. Thank you for asking.
Yes,
Makes me
you're
so happy
very
to talk
welcome.
about it.
Unfortunately, we are out of time, and that means you'll have to come back again someday.
Sure.
But everyone, I remind you, you can see Laura on April the 6th, Wednesday night at the Bank of New Hampshire stage, and at the Pops concert in December at the Capitol Center, around town on her bike at the Y, and who knows where else. But I want to thank you for coming on Capital Area Chats. I really and truly appreciate your making your time in your schedule to come by, and I thank you. I thank all of our viewers. I thank Josh and the staff of Concord TV. And this is Paul Brogan, your host, saying thanks for tuning in. I'll see you again. Bye.